Hello and welcome. It's All for United WFC. It's another fans forum. We thought, you know what? Connor's been in charge for the last 6 weeks. To be fair, he's in charge all the time, to be fair. But I challenge him quite a bit. And I'm like, do you know what? It's time we got the fans back on, give them an opportunity to have a little chat about what's been going on. He's bringing in loads of esteemed journalists, lots of people from across the world. But nothing's better than hearing from the fans themselves. So I've assembled 3 rather wonderful ones, all of which we've seen before. Just below me here, we have Mr. Mark W. again. We're hoping I'm not going to say anything controversial that makes him leap like that. It just can't time it any better than that. That is just brilliant. Yes, we have got young Sarah. How are you doing today, Sarah?
Good, thanks. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. And there in the bottom right, fresh from passing all of our A-levels, is young Emma. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. Well, that is what we like to hear. So I'm sure Mark will pop in and out. If you remember last time, he had a couple of problems with his device. We know that he's trying to get a much more reliable one sorted out. But anyway, he will be back. So loads for us to discuss tonight. And I am really looking forward to literally just dissecting everything that's been happening so far in pre-season with Manchester United women. So, Sarah, I'm going to ask you first of all, sort of your thoughts. I think first of all on the incomings that we've got. So we know that we signed Evie Rabjon towards the end of last season in May, so that was rather exciting. But there's only 3 so far in this pre-season. That's been Gemma Evans, of course, in the defence, Jays from Barcelona, ex-Barcelona forward, and of course young Emma Watson, who is going to provide me with just all manner of Harry Potter references. We cannot wait to unleash upon the viewing public. But what's your thoughts on all of those incomings so far?
I'm happy with those. I'm especially excited, as I think everybody is, about Jace and just, the goals that she's obviously been signed to score. I know there's been talk of some other Brazilian players joining her in the near future, so hopefully that'll happen as well. But yeah, I'm really excited to see her in action. Hopefully she's going to do really well. And then it's just good to see us signing young players as well. Young talented players like Watson. Obviously, she's only 17, which is crazy. And I think she'll definitely be part of the first team. Whether she starts every game or not remains to be seen. But I think she's definitely been signed with that in mind, that she's going to be part of the first team because she has had that experience already with Rangers. And then, I think it's good that we're sort of looking to the future and getting those young players in. I know people were being a bit unfair, I thought, about Gemma Evans without actually giving her a chance, to show what she can do. But yeah, I'm happy so far. I would hope that we'd maybe add a couple more as well. I think in terms of the right back position as well, Anna leaving has been a huge blow, and it's very hard to replace a player like that. But we haven't seen much of Jade so far. Well, obviously in the World Cup we have, which has been good. But I'm looking forward to seeing how she will step into that role as well. So I think between her and Lisa Nelson, who was also unfortunately injured for a lot of the time the end of last season, it'll be like having 2 extra signings, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're quite right. Possibly in for another Brazilian. Graham Fulker's reported on it that Carolyn could be another one that potentially comes through the door, which would be amazing if that was to come off as well. But Emma, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to phrase that question ever so slightly differently. Obviously, you're welcome to talk to us about Gemma Evans and Jays. But Emma Watson, she's 17 years old, so she's a year younger than you. Do you look at that and just think, how on earth is it that somebody the same age as me is being bought by Man United with a view to playing for the first team and having had Champions League experience? How does that sort of register with you?
Well, it makes me feel old for one, but it's just exciting because it's like it's plans for the future. So it's good that we have that in mind, and hopefully she'll be a really good player for us, and she'll be someone who we can rely on for years and years. So it's exciting, and I felt the same when Evie came in as well a few months ago. So it's good to have the young players for the future, I think.
Absolutely. And carrying on from that, Gabriella's put on here that Emma Watson benches Martha Thomas for Scotland. Can you see, like Sarah mentioned, opportunities for Emma to be starting for Manchester United this season?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we would have bought her otherwise, considering she's not super young in the sense of she's still developing. Obviously, she's fully fledged international now, so I think she's got every chance of breaking into the first team and making a claim to be a starter.
Absolutely. Why not? And the Sporty says, if you're good enough, you are old enough. Jennifer, meanwhile, give Martha a run in the team for God's sake. Well, we shall see. We'll come to Martha Thomas and who should start and who shouldn't, I suppose, as we get through. But Mark, your overriding thoughts on the incomings here at Manchester United this pre-season so far?
Yeah, good. I think I said last time I was on your show that I wasn't panicking. There was a long time to go before the end of the season. We've still got another month before the season starts. I wrote something, I think it may have been for Sarah's site actually, at some point in about the explosion of young talent at the World Cup, and how really, if you look, I mean, I looked at some of the under-17s Euros earlier in the summer as well, and some of the talent is coming through at a much rapider rate now. Understandably, fitness, coaching, everything is there for younger girls now that wasn't there.
And with that, he's gone. He will be back. Well, it's all part of the entertainment, and it's part of the reason why I got him on. Because it makes me chuckle, makes me giggle. So he will be straight back. Look, here we go. Watch this.
Oh, sorry, did you lose me for a bit then?
There he is. Right, carry on.
Yeah. You see, I wasn't even aware you'd lost me then. I don't know at one point, but I was saying anyway that I think the explosion of young talent in world football is no surprise, because young girls have got better access to fitness, training, everything now than they had even quite recently. So we just have to I think we have to be on the front foot in terms of planning for the future like that. And I think Emma Watson and Evie Rabjohn, from what I've seen of them, are extremely exciting signings for us to nurture. And I'm very pleased. I think Gemma Evans has always impressed me as well as a potential squad player. I don't see her sort of walking into the side, but she's always looked to me a very solid defender. So yeah, I'm reasonably pleased with that.
Which is good news. Sporty's asked us in just over 2 weeks until the transfer window closes. If by just over 2 weeks you mean basically 3 weeks, then yeah, 14th September apparently is when it ends. And we'll have a nice little 2 week period before the season actually starts in October. It feels so late to be starting a football season, doesn't it? It's absolutely mad. So yeah, there we go. We've spoken a little bit about the players that are due to come in, and I think it's going to be quite amazing, but I do feel like potentially we're going to need some more. We've got 13 players that have gone out through the door so far this pre-season. Perhaps one of the biggest names being Kirsty Hansen, Sarah. What was your thoughts on Hansen leaving? Because I did think maybe there was an opportunity for her to come back into the squad, having played as well as she did, and put a little bit of competition up for Leah Goulton. But clearly, Mark Skinner has decided to let her go to Aston Villa, and Kirsty Hansen is no more for Manchester United. What was your thinking behind that decision?
I'm not surprised, because I think a lot of people were expecting it when she came back from loan. It was kind of hinted at that she would be leaving. And also, I'm not surprised that Villa wanted her permanently, given how well she did for them. I would be disappointed. I'm sorry to see her go. I would have been quite happy for her to stay and, provide that competition, because I think she's a really good player. So I am sorry to see her go, but good luck to her. just not when she plays us, obviously.
Obviously, that seems fair. And Highlane here talking about Jay is hopefully improved on the spot vacated by the Barry, Chris, and Voldemort. Well, I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. Can't say anything else about that. And whilst the jury's out, for me on Evans, given the history, I'm prepared to give her a chance, which is absolutely good. Gabriella's not panicking, but sees other WSL teams also strengthening their already strong teams. Going to be an exciting season, to say the least. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that at this moment in time, it is still the beginning of pre-season, because the Premier League started, football's back. In that respect, it just almost feels like the WSL should be back by now. The Championship's back, the WNL's back, all of women's football is back, with the exception of the WSL. But obviously, Emma, we have missed out on quite a few players. It's obviously not just young Kirsty's gone. Leslie Russo's gone to Arsenal. Ona Batier's gone to Barcelona. Jade Moore's disappeared as well. There's quite a few people too. Kara, someone who we might have expected to have seen more of. Were there any names that left during the closed season that were a surprise to you?
Not so much a surprise, but there's a few that I was disappointed about. Or I think if one was to be a surprise, it would probably be Tunkara, purely because of how long she was meant to be here for and the way in which she left. I thought that was a bit strange, but otherwise it's not really, players like Hansen, I would have liked her to stay, but I'm also not surprised that she left for the game time, because she's more than good enough to be playing every week. But I think, the players like Russo and Batier, I think we've recruited well to replace them. Obviously, it'll take a while, I think, to adjust to them, but I think we'll be okay in that sense.
Hoping you're correct. Absolutely hoping you're correct. And Highlane says here, expected Hansen to go anyway, because it seemed like she didn't want to stay here anymore. She was quite happy to go to Villa. It's probably best not to keep people against their will. Would you agree with that, Mark? Do you subscribe to the idea that actually it's sort of irrelevant whether or not we need the player? If they want to go, we should just let them go for squad harmony?
I'm disappointed personally about Kirsty Hansen, certainly. I mean, going back to her, I think she could have done a job for us, understand why she wanted to go. And yeah, I do fundamentally agree with that, though. You know, part of the job of a manager is to know who's happy and who isn't, and you don't want a bunch of discontented players, however good they are. Ona Batcher, I was always convinced was going to go anyway. Massively disappointed. She'll be, a legend for me for as long as I'm alive. She was a superb player. I feel privileged to have watched her in a United shirt. Always felt that she'd go back to Spain, that she'd go to Barcelona at some point. So really no great, I'm not disappointed in her. I totally understand her reasoning for doing that. Disappointed to lose her, obviously. Russo was a big blow. Just apart from anything else, the way it happened, I felt she might have shown a little bit more sort of respect towards the fans, just in terms of the way it went. But yeah, you can't keep disgruntled players, and you've got to, part of a manager's job is to understand, who actually isn't likely going to be, because there is a big turnover in women's football. And they're not on lengthy contracts very often. So you've got to understand sort of when it's going to happen, and maybe be prepared and have other players to come in, so that you're not looking around through the summer and thinking who on earth we can get to replace her. And that's the thing for me.
I think you're spot on with that, to be fair. So yes, that's a lot of players that have gone out. We've got a few that have gone on loan as well. Kira Barry off to Crystal Palace. Grace Clinton back out again, Sarah, to Spurs. Bella Reedford on dual registration with Burnley as well. Talk to me a little bit about the Grace Clinton bit, because I sort of sit there and I wonder why it is that we get some of these players in and then allow them to go out. Obviously, she spent all of last season, or the vast majority of last season, out on loan as well. Why do you think it is that she's been sent out on loan again? I mean, she's actually contracted until the end of 2025, but we'd be in a situation where should have one season basically, potentially at United. Do you think that's the idea? Oh, nice little music. Do you think that's the idea that that Grace Clinton will be given that year to sort of see if she can develop into a player that United use for the first team? Or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably is the thinking behind it. It's, I mean, again, like I'm not the manager, so I can't say I know best or anything, but yeah, it is. It's kind of a strange one. I mean, I know she was kind of talked about when she was signed as, you know, being one for the future, but she's clearly done well. She's, you know, at Bristol City, and she has played in the WSL before with Everton. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I hope the loan works out well for her. But I personally would have liked her to stay, for us to give her a chance in the team now and just see how it goes, even till January. And yeah, it just would have been nice to see more of her. I know way back in the Conti Cup last season, we talked about just it was a strange decision that she wasn't at least in the match day squad when a lot of other younger players were. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of confused about it, but you know, any extra experience she can get is obviously good. But I would have liked to see her stay with us personally.
Speaking there after on mute, absolutely no good to
I
anybody.
stunned you into silence.
What can I say? Well, you have this ability, Sarah, that's for sure. Yeah, I think, Emma, it's a fair point to make, isn't it? But we've also got Kira Barry off to Crystal Palace. We do seem to have a habit of anybody that seems to come through the youth team doesn't seem to really get that opportunity to start so much. And I suppose that's why I question what's going to happen with Emma Watson. The fact that we've had this Champions League experience is probably the only thing that's going for her in terms of the fact that she might be given a starting lineup or the opportunity to challenge someone like Ella Toon for her position. Because again, Kira Barry off out, I don't know when her contract ends, but we don't seem to be in a position where we give these people the opportunity to play. Do you wish that we had the opportunity, that there were perhaps more games, for example, to be available for these youngsters to play in, which would give them that opportunity to play for the first team and the managers the chance to see whether or not they would fit?
Yeah, I think more games in that sense would be a good idea, because I think it would be good for the manager as well to maybe learn some rotation. But I don't know, because I get loaning them out if they're going to play regularly is good to see how they play in more competitive environments, in more, what's the word, mature leagues almost. But yeah, I wish that we kept more young players on at United, just so we could let them try here, because obviously every team is different. So going on loan, playing well in one team, one system, might not always mirror the same way coming back at United and playing in our system.
Yeah, spot on with your words there. Sport face. I'm actually surprised to see her back at all. Leon here. I was sure Leon would be sold this summer after going out on loan in the spring. We're going to get to Leon. Don't worry about that. That will absolutely be on the list of things to chat about within the next sort of 20 minutes or so, I would think. But Mark, I think we are in an interesting situation here, aren't we? Because we know, especially in the forward line, Ella Toon hasn't really had that much competition. Vilderbo Risa doesn't appear to be used that often to replace Ella Toon, so she plays more often than she doesn't. She's occasionally been shifted out to the right-hand side of the front three, which is always an interesting thing to do. Where do you stand on the youth? Because it just doesn't feel like there's an opportunity. And we're going to go on to the pre-season friendly in a minute, but we know that some young players got the chance to play in that. But these young players playing in these pre-season friendlies, they might do really, really well, but they're never seeming to be in contention then when it comes to the actual season. They just get sent back down into where the youth team are, and they continue to do what they're doing, and the first team do what the first team do. What do you think it's going to take for this ability to break into the first team now?
It's very difficult. I mean, you've already mentioned the lack of games, and I mean that's a big thing for me, that we do get a lack of games, obviously in the WSL, And even if you throw the Continental Cup in, if we end up back in that, which I hope we don't in the group stages, but let's see what happens there. Doesn't give you a lot of time and a lot of opportunity to blood young players, I don't think. So I suppose loan can be the only option. I'm not a fan of loans. I mean, I look back through history, and many of the best young players for United men came through the club without going on loan. There were exceptions. Beckham benefited from a loan, but a lot of players, certainly recently, Rashford, etc., didn't need a loan. And I always feel that if you can, you're better keeping them and developing them within the club. But with the lack of game time you're going to get with the senior side, I don't think there's any alternative, but I think that's all you can do. I was a bit surprised with Grace Clinton last season. I felt when we bought her and Maya Letitia last season, I felt we'd snapped up the two best young talents in the league. They both had substantial game time that season, and I could see Greg, because I think she had played a lot for Everton that previous season. And I could see them both kind of hitting the ground running. It happened with Maya, obviously, and she was great. Grace, just a bit disappointed we haven't seen much from her, really. And yeah, it was kind of inevitable, I suppose. There was a loan, but I suppose if you're Grace Clinton, what are you thinking now? Are you thinking, is there a place for me at this club? Does she think maybe it would have been better for her to stay at Everton for another season? And I don't know. I don't want to put words into her mouth, thoughts into her head or whatever, but it is a bit of a catch-22 for me. And certainly with Emma Watson, she's somebody who's already reached a certain level, certainly in internationals. I'd like to see them given game time. I'd like to see us sort of thrive enough in the different competitions, including the Champions League, and be able to use enough players. But it's not easy, because, I'm a fan of keeping a settled side if things are going well.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with that. I was a big advocate of why should Mark's going to be changing too much. And again, we might disagree with me based on something she said a little bit earlier, but why change it? If you're going to be second in the league and battling for that title with Chelsea, it's because there's only the 20-odd games, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Because we know already just one loss can be the difference between you winning the league and coming second. So it's like the stakes are just ridiculously high, whereas if it was a 15-team league, a 16-team league, you've got a little bit more breathing space potentially. But then, of course, you need the in-depth of the whole league. It's no good just having 4 teams come in that get sort of bullied and won over by all of the big teams all of the time. So it's just part of the growth, I think, of the league. But Sarah, Mark talks a little bit there about loans. Fuso is obviously the big one who we would probably mention at the moment, and Leon. They've both been on loan. They're both back. I don't recall seeing Leon anywhere near the team. We didn't see a team sheet. Again, we're going to get to the preseason in a minute. But for the game that was played yesterday, she didn't appear to be there. Fuso was, and she was one of the goal scorers. Where do you see an opening for someone like Fuso? Because that position on the right-hand side of the front three, I think would pretty much be unanimously agreed was the one that was always up for question. When we thought of who's Mark's going to play, we could probably name 10 of the team. That was always the one. Would it be Paris? Would it be Garcia? Would it be Thomas? Who's going to be playing there? Do you see a spot for Fuso there as potentially taking that position for our own?
I mean, I can see her staying and definitely challenging for it. It's good that she got the goal as well. I think that's, that bodes well for her, show what she can do. I mean, if it was me, I'd be picking Garcia ahead of Fuso. I just think she's been a fantastic signing and really excited to see more of her this season as well. But yeah, I mean, let's see what happens, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get to pre-season. Emma, have you got any idea who we're playing for pre-season this year?
Aside from the Munich game that got leaked earlier, I have no idea.
No. Mark, have you got any idea? Have you seen a fixture list for pre-season?
No.
Got any idea what we're doing?
No, I haven't. I'd like to think it's not as off the hoof as it appears, but no, I don't know anything.
Sarah, anything from you? You seen anything?
No.
I was absolutely blown away to see on the Man United app that we'd had a match against Leicester. No team sheet forthcoming, so they didn't tell us who played. no substitutes. They've given us about 3 minutes worth of highlights that we can look at. So we've at least seen that, and there's an opportunity to go on the app and see that. Good highlights, to be fair, with some good goals, but so very little around it. It's like with everything that's going on at the club at the moment, this is your opportunity. We've just had a World Cup. England have made the final. We had this same conversation last year. What is it, Emma, about this football club that we just don't seem to care about pre-season? An opportunity to get the fans in. They're dying for some football in England. They've all been waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch teams play football. They'd love to go and watch a game at the weekend at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Why is it, do you think, that Man United just insist on not giving us any information about pre-season? What have they got to lose?
I have absolutely no idea, because it feels like this would be the perfect time to bring fans in to ride the wave from the World Cup. But, because, I mean, United don't really tell us much about the women's team in the way, like, when someone signs a new contract or we sign a new player, it's rarely mentioned how long the contract is. So a lot of the stuff is kept in the dark from everyone, which I just don't get, but it makes no sense to me.
It doesn't seem to make sense at all. And High Lane's put here, meant to be playing Everton later this week, aren't we? The point is where? I before I come on any show on All for United, I always make sure I go to the Manchester United app, because that is ultimately where all the information gets put. I check on Twitter. There's not a dicky bird. The fact that we've got Georgia Stanway, Mark, telling us that we'll be playing Bayern Munich, I mean, that is ridiculous. For any football club, it's poor. But when you're Manchester United, your pre-season fixtures shouldn't be being leaked by one of the Lionesses on a breakfast talk show, should it?
No, I mean, I can't believe there's any kind of rationale behind it in an attempt to be really secretive and not let people know and not leak plans to our. I'm sure it's just chaos, to be honest. And I think probably, without opening up the lid again on discussions about how poorly run the club is generally, I also do think, well, we know, don't we, that the women's team is still seen as an afterthought by too much of the club structure. And I mean, there's the thing about not knowing when the games are going to be, and there's also the thing about, can we actually see some of those pre-season games? Because actually, when we talk about young people, young players, as we did before, coming through, one of the big learning curves for them is to actually start playing in front of supporters. And, even a few hundred fans for a pre-season friendly would be something, I would think, for sort of players to get the teeth into. But no, it baffles me. I don't see any reason for it at all. And it just, I'd love to think it's more than just apathy, but I think it probably is just apathy, sadly.
I mean, this is the thing. Also, the Twitter were trying to promote season tickets. If the pre-season match past Leicester has whet the appetite, but how?
Exactly.
Like, one tweet,
exactly.
5 pictures, 3 minutes of highlights, a tiny little interview with Mark Skinner. It's a global brand. And Ellie talks about, what does she put here? Look at Liverpool and Brighton on pre-season tours. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of pre-season tours in general, because they are far more about glorifying the club and trying to get overseas fans, which I've got no problems with. But ultimately, that's not a good build-up to a season of football. That's something you do maybe for the first couple of weeks, have a couple of exhibitions, do all of that. Then you get into the pre-season workout and the pre-season getting used to everything. Sarah, Sporty's put here, only reason to hide it for me is Mark wants to try a new formation and doesn't want anyone to see how he may line up as the season begins. This is ridiculous, isn't it? Even if that's the case, this is elite level football. Manchester United men don't get the luxury of not having their pre-season games put there. People can see it. And more importantly, the behind closed doors bit, I think I understand. You get that opportunity. But why is it that the whole of pre-season hasn't been mentioned? If you're going to do it behind closed doors, just don't tell anybody anything. Yeah. If they hadn't said anything, we wouldn't have known there was a match. But because they've thrown it out there, now we're like, what's going on? Can you fathom anything as to what's going on at the club, as to why they're so seemingly anti the fans when it comes to talking about pre-season friendlies?
It really is just baffling. I mean, I agree with what everyone else has said. It has to be just incompetence, plain and simple. It's just, there's so many disasters lately. I mean, I don't know if this is just me being cynical, and not to get too into all the recent, the heavy stuff that's gone on recently with the men's team and how that has affected our women's team. But maybe I'm cynical, but it would not surprise me if there are some people at the club who are thinking, oh, they've had enough abuse lately, enough backlash. We just won't promote this. No, maybe not, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me. And there was a comment earlier about Lionesses FC, and we've talked about that before. But especially straight after World Cup, it is very, very strange that the club haven't tried to capitalize on that. Come see our World Cup finalists in action, and yeah, it's just a very, very weird one.
You agree? I think it just baffles me. And again, the fact that they're going to give us the information, so I can tell you a little bit about the game as such. It was 2-2. It finished against Leicester. The highlights are available on the Man United app, so do go and have a little watch. Like I said, some good stuff there. Evans and Watson both started, which was absolutely brilliant. Fuso scored a goal. Martha Thomas managed to score. She also managed to miss 2 and hit the post. Only going by the highlights, not picking on anyone. It's just what I saw. But then you look at some of the first team players that we might know that took part. We know that Hannah Blundell was there. She set up Fuso for the first goal. Sophie Bagley was obviously in goal because Mary Earps was probably a bit tired. Jade Riviere was there. Hayley Ladd was on the pitch. Mannion played. Letitia played. Galton and Garcia. And, of course, Nikita Paris was also there. So it's not the whole team, but there was some youth as well. I think the 2 goals sort of came as the youth became more prevalent on the pitch, which would make sense. But Emma, did you get the chance to have a look at any of the highlights? Have you seen any of that game?
I've seen the goals. I saw the videos of them kind of floating around on my timeline. I thought they looked good goals. But yeah, I mean, the highlights themselves, I haven't seen them completely, but I don't get why they're only 5 minutes worth of highlights. It's a whole game that no one's been able to see, so why are you giving us 5 minutes of a 90-minute game? It's not really the best representation. They're obviously going to pick the most significant moments, but it means we can't see like how we are on the ball and in between chances and everything. So I just think it's been very poorly managed in that sense. But yeah, they've not shown enough of it, but from what I have seen, it looked good enough.
I mean, we have seen from Man United, communication is not their strong point. That has 100% become apparent in the last 3 to 4 weeks. But Mark, again, what I find, again, that baffles me about this is they've given us the information. They've told us a game happened. They've told us the scoreline. They've told us, here's some highlights, have a little watch. They've done a little bit of that. Not hide nor hair, like I say, of a team sheet. We've got no idea who played. I'm looking through the highlights. I'm trying to work out who some of the youngsters are based on their shirts, but I can never pause it enough to catch some of their names. And the one thing about the women's game, the hair, it's unbelievable. I find it when I'm on the touchlines as well for Stevenage. You try and find a number and it's just hidden behind hair. And it's like, move your hair. I can't. There has to be a rule for this. Perhaps go for pigtails like Emma's gone down there. Do something or move the numbers because it's mad. I can't see them. So I've got no idea who some of these players were. Why do we not even get that? Even a team sheet? Who's that going to hurt?
Well, it's baffling as well because it's only kind of those of us who are already kind of hardcore fans who are going to bother to do that, isn't it? It's not going to bring in new fans, and surely, like you said at the start of this discussion, we've just had a World Cup. There's another bounce for women football. That surely Manchester United, who once were specialists in getting publicity out of almost anything, or the better kind of publicity anyway, unlike some of the things we've had more recently. But we used to be brilliant at that. Even when we weren't that great on the field, we were always brilliant at self-publicising. And yet, when it comes to the women's team, it just seems yeah, it just doesn't. It just seems either an afterthought or no thought at all. And like I say, there's only going to be us, people like us, who are going to try and look for that. You kind of casual fan who presumably we're trying to attract to build the fan base for this is not going to be bothered to look at things like that. You've got to hit them with something. You've got to publicise it. You've got to create some excitement around it. And all right, we haven't. I'm presuming the England players aren't back yet from the World Cup, but we had very few players represented in the World Cup actually, so the majority of them could really do with a decent pre-season and do with getting out there and seeing some fans again. I think it seems an awfully long time since the last time they did it. I don't see that it's benefiting anyone in any way to keep it a secret, I think is what I'm saying in a rather elongated way.
You did it brilliantly. It gives me a chance to take a breath, which I always appreciate. I think there's a few things to point out here. First of all, Sporty has obviously been taking a look at the script. I'm a bit worried because I'm the only one that's seen this. And he's already worked out where I'm going to go next. So we will talk about that. But Connor, who is the one who's all for United WFC, that's not me typing that out today, has put, it's not unusual for the first few games to be behind closed doors. It's the future ones I've got the issue with, especially with the Nations League at the end of September. Not much pre-season left for the starting 11. And I think this is a really key point, Sarah, because Mark Skinner points out, that pre-season started 2 or 3 weeks ago during the World Cup. Obviously didn't have all of his players back because of the fact that there were varying, 6 of them, I think, appeared in the World Cup altogether. So it's by no means the whole squad, but some that were missing. So they've had a little bit of preparation time. They've had a game here. We're talking about potentially Everton and Bayern Munich. So there's 2 games potentially in the next week coming up. But as we know, there's going to be this, I try very hard not to swear on this channel. There's going to be this rather bizarre decision that having finished a World Cup, within a month of that, they're going to do pre-season and then all of the international players get to disappear again and go and take part in the UEFA Nations League before the season starts. So, again, we're talking about pre-season. It's already been completely ruptured because of the fact that not every club is going to have their players back at the beginning of pre-season. And then they're going to potentially play and be injured before the season starts. It's rubbish planning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. It just makes absolutely no sense. Like, I'm already cringing to think of the potential injuries that clubs will have. Even with the men's, when the Nations League was brought in, I just thought, what is the point of any of this? And I can say this coming from a small country who, probably isn't going to achieve all that much on the international stage generally, but it's kind of like, oh, this is a nice little excuse for us to go off and and have a few games. I don't know, it's just such a bad decision. We've had so many problems anyway in the women's game, especially in recent times with ACL injuries. Look at what happened with Arsenal last season, and then all the injuries that England had ahead of the World Cup as well. It doesn't bode well.
Absolutely. Dave. Sorry, yeah, it is Dave. I just got my eyes out. Go and see Specsavers. Other opticians are available also. But it is a WTF moment. And I don't speak in letters, so that's why I couldn't just say that. But it is absolutely that. Emma, how can it be, as Connor puts here, England are going to play 5 days before the opener? And as Mickey says, the full squad, when are they actually going to be able to play together? The World Cup final was obviously last week. Probably at least another 2 weeks until the girls from England come back. So, granted, it's Mary Earps. Granted, it's Ella Toon. Granted, it's Katie Zellum. These are players who you are expecting to play in the first team anyway and can probably fit in. But when you're trying to get your dynamics together, trying to get your tactics together, as has already been mentioned, maybe the pre-season behind closed doors is to try out new tactics and to try out new things. These players have now got to pick it up. It's going to be 2 weeks in, and then, we've got to go back to England again. So they're not going to get any time getting to know any of the new players. it's a madness, isn't it? How can we be playing the Nations League? Why haven't they just put it like a couple of weeks into the season so that clubs have got the chance to build into the season properly rather than doing this?
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous, really, because, I mean, if it was me, I'd have, playing for the Nations League, I'd have maybe some new players who maybe weren't in the World Cup squad, so that then the ones that were are able to spend time with their clubs, which they should be spending more time with. Because obviously, you know, the players that we did have at the World Cup final, obviously they are the ones that you'd expect to come straight in and gel straight away because that's just the players they are. But obviously with the new signings and everything, it would help if they had proper training, proper test matches, gelling with those players just to work on the chemistry, because in a way, by the time they come back to United pre-season, they'll be off at England again. So pretty much their pre-season will be with England rather than with United, which is completely backwards, but I don't get it.
It's a very bizarre moment, that's for absolutely sure. I did just want to double check something. I was right. Jennifer mentioned about FIFA. I'm all up for having a go at FIFA as much as the next person, but it's the UEFA Nations League, so I don't think we can have a go at them for that one. Definitely not their fault. This is UEFA that have absolutely dropped the ball. And Dave mentions, don't forget our MLT. Well, I haven't forgotten her, but she went out for a holiday basically, and then came back. So, you know, she was in the game yesterday. And frankly, if they take her, brilliant. If they don't, either way, it's still going to really take the mickey. I'm doing very well today. That's good. I've managed to maintain my composure superbly. This was a good one from Erwin. Mark, could the lack of pre-season with United mean Skinner would leave some of the England girls out of the 11 for the first WSL game? Can you envisage a world where Mary Earps isn't starting? Since she came to the club, we've played every single minute of every single WSL game, and I know Emma won't like this, but the most clean sheets as well, which is not just a reason to judge the goalkeeper by, is it, Emma? But, of course, it is a stat, and it's a pretty good one. Can you see a world where Mary Earps doesn't start the first game? Because if that happens, I think I might fall off my chair.
I don't want to live in such a world, put it that way. But I think it's part of that. It doesn't just give Mark that problem. Obviously, it gives other managers that problem as well. You know, there's going to be all the top teams are going to be affected by this, aren't they? And you know, it's like, what decisions do you make then? You know, is it possible that you actually think of leaving some of your top players out? We've got a tough game at Villa, though, haven't we? So I mean, to me, I want to see the best 11 for that game. It might be if we had, if you like, a home game against, if you like, a lesser club, then maybe you could think about doing that. But for me, at Villa Park, I'd want to see the best 11 out there. I'd certainly want to see Mary Earps out there. And I certainly want to see our other best players out there as well. I agree with what Emma said. It's all backwards to me. I think the problem for me seems to be that UEFA and FIFA I've really got a bit of a growing thing here with women's football, and they want to exploit it as much as they possibly can. And I do worry that club football, certainly domestic club football, is going to get pushed into the background more and more. I mean, we saw last season what happened with Chelsea and Arsenal getting to the semi-finals of the Champions League and having to play their league games on different days because the Champions League wanted it to be at the weekend, which completely disrupted the club programme. And I do feel that there's a lot of politics going on here. You know, my understanding was we were given the 1st of October start for the women's domestic season, or the Super League season anyway, as a result of the World Cup and the timing of that. And obviously someone's seen that and thought, well, hang on a minute, there's a very useful gap there that we can use for something else. And UEFA are thinking, yeah, ching, 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 let's get something else in there. And the ACL injuries pile up, all sorts of reasons to be against it. But for me, it's always been domestic football first for me anyway. It's always been club over country for me as a priority. And I feel like we're getting the sticky end of the stick on this, as usual.
I think most people would agree with you on that one. But Sarah, Mark brings up a good point there, isn't it? Which is people are trying to get the most out of the women's game as they can. And I think we are in a situation where it is starting to grow. We're seeing great growth within the game. We're seeing that obviously the WSL and the Championship are potentially being pushed into like the Premier League sort of situation. So they're looking to try and find a company as such that will take it on and help with the growth of it there. But it doesn't change the fact that ultimately the Lionesses will fill out Wembley Stadium, and the WSL will not necessarily fill out every stadium they're playing in, even if that stadium only holds 10,000 people. But at the moment, the international game certainly feels bigger than the domestic game, just purely because of the amount of sellouts you can get.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with all of those points. And even here, I mean, our league here in Ireland is not same with the men. There's not enough investment put into it. But I mean, to the point where Premier League games will always you'll get more people in Ireland watching Premier League games on TV than they will attending League of Ireland matches. But yeah, just it's definitely being pushed more. And I think also, I mean, of course, everybody wants to play for their country. You're not going to say no. Well, unless you're Leah Galton and you have other reasons for that. But
I'm with Leah.
Yeah. But can you see Mary Earps saying, no, sorry, I'm not going to go off with England. I'm going to play this game at Villa Park. The players as well will kind of, I mean, I can't help but feel like some would probably prioritize their international careers. So that's a kind of an attitude among the players as well, or it seems to be, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. Leslie Russo was asked before she left the club, one of those interviews that they did, and it was, would you rather win the World Cup with England or win the WSL with Manchester United? And she actually answered, I'd rather win the World Cup with England. It was at that point.
Not surprising now.
Genuinely, at that point, that was when I realised she was going to leave Man United. That was when I gave up all hope and went, you know what, she's going to go regardless of what we do. Because, if you're a true United fan, the answer to that question is win the league with Manchester United. It doesn't matter how much you feel about England because you're a United fan. Like if that was somebody else, that was Nikita Paris answering that. Absolutely, I'd expect to say the World Cup. Not a Man United fan. Totally get it. But yeah, that was a bit odd. Okay, well, that's enough ranting and raving about that. Let's move on a little bit to something else we can rant and rave about. At the end of that pre-season friendly, Emma, Mark Skinner said that it was good to see a mixture between the experienced players and the youth, to see some of these players, the kids he called them, getting an opportunity. But he did say we made at least 7 goal-scoring chances that we not just should score, have to score. So it's not just a case of, they missed it, never mind, at least they got in the right chances. Goals that we should have scored. Do you worry at all about it? I mean, we've got rid of Leslie Russo, who ultimately just about hit double digits for us, I think, over all competitions. We don't have and haven't ever had really that prolific goal scorer other than in the Championship era. In the WSL, we haven't had it. The goals seem to be spread out a lot more. Ella Toon gets quite a few. Obviously, we've got the arrival of Jays coming in. But when you look at Leah Galton, Martha Thomas, Nikita Paris, Garcia, they're all single-digit strikers when it comes to WSL at the moment. Very few, if any, have had a 2-digit WSL goal-scoring season. Do you worry at all about our front line?
I wouldn't say I worry about the front line, but yeah, I think clinical finishing is something that has been an issue for a while. But I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer because obviously it does feel like we get a lot of goals because our scoring is quite spread out. But it would help if we had that plus like a 20 goal a season striker as well, because then that's just even more goals, which is obviously better for goal difference and generally wins you more games. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not something I worry about, but it's something that would be nice if it was addressed.
I tend to agree with that. Gabriella's said World Cup or Champions League is the real question. It's certainly a question. I genuinely don't know whether she would have answered any differently. I still think she would have gone for the World Cup, but that's that. Dave has put out, we all know why Russo left. The behind the scenes people didn't offer her a decent wage for the club she was playing for. If you can offer me a source that proves that as fact, then I will doff my cap to you. But until that moment, I don't believe it. So there we go. Let's be real. Russo for us was never at her best last season. She didn't quite have the breakout season I thought she would. The Euros performance clouded people's perception of her impact at club level. I think we will be better without her. Let's hope so. And Highlane says, I think the thing that frustrated me watching the highlights was the number of times Thomas in particular was in on goal and somehow didn't score, which, Mark, sort of brings me to my next point about these 7 goals. Martha Thomas did score 1, but I think 3 of the 7 that he's talking about would have been Martha Thomas ones. There was one which she put wide, which is a good effort, to be fair. You know, that's going to happen. She had the one that she scored was a good ball in from Nikita Paris, which she turned in. Not too dissimilar from the one against Aston Villa that she should have scored when we drew 0-0. She had one that hit the post, and there was a lovely, delicious little ball. You could see that Emma Watson had learnt her Wingardium Leviosa trick, because the ball just lifted beautifully over the defence and landed plumb for Martha Thomas, who then really turned into a bit of a Seamus Finnegan and just fluffed it entirely and made it explode because it went wide. So it wasn't great. But where do you see the goals coming from next this season?
They'll have to spread around as they have done. But I take the point. I think it's an issue, and I never saw Russo as someone who's very good forward, very good player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to criticise her. I think she's an exceptional player now that she's gone. Gutted that she's gone. Never saw her in that kind of goal scoring mode. You can do it without. Successful teams have done it by spreading the goals around. But I suppose I look at it quite simply. Last season, Sam Kerr was number 9 for us rather than Chelsea. We win the double. And that to me, you know, both those Chelsea games, the one at Chelsea and the cup final, you know, we had enough of that game in both games to hit the net and didn't manage to. And that is the thing that I came out of frustrated most about last season. I was very pleased with a lot of last season, as many of us were. But in the end, wow, we got close there. What was missing? It was that Sam Kerr, Rachel Daly, whatever, striker to actually hit the back of the net. I'm not sure that Jays is that striker either, actually. We'll see. I'd love her to prove me wrong. I think she's another very talented player that we've got. We've got some great talent. Garcia is fantastic, and I hope she gets more starts this season. I still don't think we've got that player. So yeah, I agree. It's still a concern of mine.
It is an interesting one, that little poacher. And Jennifer, what a fantastic point I think you made here. No player really had a decent run of the team, except for maybe Russo as well. I would have added to this list, but Toon and Galton accepted. Thomas, Garcia, Williams, Ayal, always substitutes. And that was true. As we said, they were moved around, moved around quite a bit. Leah Galton did quite well, did get quite a few goals as well. But again, they're not that, it's that spearhead. It's that one person, the Harry Kane, I suppose you could call it, the one who you can turn to, who you know is likely to take a chance if they're given it.
And it's in those games, isn't it? Those crucial tight games where a player like that can get a goal. You know, and I think, yeah, you can say, well, they didn't have enough time, but I love Martha Thomas. Williams was fantastic for us off the bench last season. If they've been given more time, we're saying, well, they need more and more chances to score a goal. And I'm looking at that player who gets one chance and scores. And that's what we haven't got.
That's the thing. You can't guarantee the chances, can you? That's the thing. So when they come, you need to have them. And yes, Jennifer's come up with our word again. Last season we had seconditis. Hopefully it's dealt with and we become firstitis, which would be great. Whatever happened to the Carolyn rumours, they're still going round. They haven't disappeared. I know it's another player on the right. We did get her, but Keats can always play that inside false 10 also. I don't know if that's where I'd want Keats, but yes, absolutely. I think the rumours are still there. We'll just have to wait and see. As with anything, listen, they can't even be bothered to tell us when there's a pre-season friendly. We probably won't find out when the signing's going to come till about November. So
she probably had her medical already.
Do you know what I mean? She probably played the game yesterday, and that's why I don't want to tell anyone, because they haven't.
Well, Emma Watson has been training with us for weeks before we signed her, and everyone knew she was with us. They even showed a training kit in the pile of kits. I mean, it was absolutely obvious that, oh, this is an exciting announcement for you. Well, yes, we know. We've been paying attention.
Unbelievable. It really was. Your Wizard Barry is potentially the nicest thing anyone has ever written on here for me. So thank you. After watching the 5-minute clip from yesterday, I can't see Thomas being our number one striker. I can't see it either, if I'm honest. And Carolyn had a great game last night. Don't know who for, though, Mickey. So the last sort of thing really that I wanted to talk about was, as we talk about players coming in, players going out, pre-season friendlies, communication in general, I think one of the key things that was frustrating about last season was the knowledge that we had so many people that were going to be running out of contract. And again, no information as to what was happening with them. We just assume that anyone who's got an option is going to be re-signed and the option will be put on. But we're not given too much information. Now, obviously, there was a lot that had their option activated at the end of last season. Having looked through Jamie Spencer's cracking piece of editorial and doing a little bit of work there, we're in a situation where contracts will end at the end of this season for the likes of Fuso, Leon, Williams, Garcia, Harris, Zellum, Earps, Bagley, Blundell, Thor, Mannion, Vilderbo-Risa, Hayley Ladd, Carrie Jones, and Martha Thomas. In fact, there is an option for Leah Galton, so I would imagine she'd stay. So we could be starting next season with Leah Galton, Jade Riviere, Millie Turner, Maya Letitia, Grace Clinton, back from loan, Lisa Nielsen, and Ella Toon, which are the only people that are contracted beyond them. Is this, and my question will go to all of you, so I'll start with you, Sarah, we'll move around, so just once she's finished, you crack on, because I've got a right frog in my throat I'm going to need to try and get rid of while she's chatting. But are we not, and that worries me. It worries me that we're in a situation where every year we constantly have contracts ending of the bulk of the squad and that we don't have seemingly more tied to longer contracts. Where do you see the whole contract thing? Because it smacks to me of not being the cleverest thing that the club can do.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, and you can say, that across the women's game, like contracts are shorter or whatever. But we do see squads being seriously depleted. Like you see very small squads at certain points over the summer, and it always alarms me to see that. But yeah, we just leave everything so late. So it's very frustrating, but it is also worrying. Like just when you hear the list of names, it's crazy. And now some of those players I wouldn't be too concerned about because I could see them renewing or wanting to stay. Like Millie Turner, I don't see wanting to go anywhere. I love how passionate she is about the club. Certain other players, it could be touch and go. Yeah, I think there's no question. Like we need to just get our act together and they tell us negotiations are ongoing and whatever. And I know, like, I understand that sometimes there isn't an update and you can't be, privy to all the private conversations that go on. But I mean, we were told this about like Russo, for example, and look what happened there. And then I'd be concerned about Mary, particularly going forward. We just need to get it sorted, basically. But I wouldn't be too optimistic that the club will suddenly get their act together. Things are quite messy.
Yeah, I think, like, again, it's the whole thing of the women's team almost being a bit of an afterthought. Like, I think we'll have a few more situations like we had for Russo and Batia this summer. Like, I don't want it to happen, but I fear it might happen with Mary. But, I feel like we don't put enough priority on renewing the players that we have because, if players want to go, if they feel like they're not getting the game time here or they just want to try something new, that's fine. But then we have to replace all of them. And then it puts us in the same situation we're in now in another 2 years' time. So I think the contract situation is just a complete mess. And it is something that I am worried about. for this season.
Mark, anything you want to add to that?
Mary's a big worry, as I think it is for all of us. She's hot property. She's recognised now as a real superstar of the women's game. And if you can't hang on to players like that, then we're in real trouble, because she has evolved during her time with us into being an absolute top-class goalkeeper. And we know she's only got a year on the contract. We know that somebody's already put a bid in for her. Wouldn't surprise me if we see more of that and more rumours through the season. And it's the unsettling effect that has as well. You know, how much, when Arsenal bid for Russo in last January's window, how much was that a serious bid, and how much of it was actually a kind of almost flirtation with Russo to sort of say, yeah, we're here, we take you this seriously, we think, you know, you're really important, and come and see us at the end of the season. And I think, I'd like to think we weren't naive enough to let that happen, but there is a big issue with it. I think two things. Generally speaking, contracts in the women's games are too short anyway. Other clubs get caught out by it. City have got caught out a few times in the last few seasons over it. So it's not just us, but we're Man United. If anyone's going to change it, let's be that change. Let's start investing in women's players to that degree, so that people can't, you know, stop taking, you know, can't dismiss us so easily and come and get our best players like that. Let's start showing that kind of investment and show the players that, show the fans that. We've got the resources to do that, surely. That, you know, the resources in the women's game are not as demanding as in the men's game. It wouldn't take an awful lot to actually make some big statements and some longer contracts, put those in place to get us to a different place.
It's definitely one of those interesting ones. I mean, again, just looking through that list that we've just read out, 6 of them are what I would classify as the first team players. Obviously, Earps, Zellum, Garcia, Paris, Blundell, and Ladd, players that you would expect to play leading roles in there. 5 of them are sort of players that come on as sub quite often. So Williams, Thorby, and a backup player, Mannion, Bilderberg Rees, obviously, and Martha Thomas. And then, as Sarah mentioned, some players who we may not necessarily expect to be at the club beyond next year, potentially people like Sophie Bagley and Carrie Jones. You've also got Adriana Leon in with that one. I think we're all pretty much agreed that Leon's career at Man United seems to be over anyway, so it's more a case of when rather than if. And of course, Fuso is a big question mark because she's only just come back and we don't know if she's going to be starting or what. I spent most of last season being really, really positive about the club and pointing out the fact that the contract with Russo and the contract with Battier would be sorted, that it's up to the players. And I think it was very interesting because, as you mentioned earlier on, Mark, we knew that Anna wanted to go back to Barcelona. That was always part of her career path. It's her country. It was her team. She loved it, fully understood it. And I think all of us sort of backed that. And again, it's Barcelona at the end of the day. They're, you know, a side that feature heavily in the Champions League. So you can understand it. It's a step up. You know, we might be Man United, but in the women's game, Barcelona are a bigger side. Russo, trickier to understand, obviously. Arsenal finishing below us. They're going to be playing a qualification game before we do. So, bit of an intriguing one there. But again, 6 of them to be running out without an option at the end of this season. I mean, because Galton will be absolutely activated. I can't see a world in which that doesn't happen. But with everything that's gone on the men's side, all of these sorts of problems and the way the communication's going and just the general running of the club, the Glazers, whether they stay, whether they go, there's such big question marks over the football club as it is. It's a big worry, isn't it, to have the likes of Mary Earps, Katie Zellum, our captain. If they were to leave, just those 2 on their own, forget Garcia, Paris, Ladd and Blundell, if those 2 were to go, they would sort of be your Russo and Battier of 23-24, wouldn't they? Can you envisage a Man
worrying
United
thing is, you know, we don't know either why they haven't signed a new contract. Is it the club being slow? Is it that we've offered them and they're actually not sure? You know, or they want, or, you know, I think I'd like to know this. We're not going to know that inevitably, but I'd like to know the circumstances behind it before I get too worried about it. But But, there's almost like two unpalatable options there. Either the club just hasn't got its act together and isn't offering the contracts quickly enough or for long enough, or the players are saying, I'm not sure I want a new contract. I want to see how things pan out. And if someone like Katie Zellum's saying that, and I'm not sure she is, well, that would be a big worry. She's Man United, Katie Zellum.
But this is it for me. I mean, Sarah, Dave's just mentioned that why 2-year contracts given and not longer. Well, clearly that's not always the case. Because, as I mentioned, the people that are going to be staying into 2025, you've got Jade Riviere. She was only bought last season, so you're looking at a 3-year contract there. Millie Turner has been at the club, for like forever, it feels. So she's someone who's extended for a long time. Ella Toon, she signs a new contract every year. So you've literally got these people locked down. The fact that we've got Maya Letitia, Grace Clinton, both bought at the same time, finishing in 2025, and Lisa Nolsson, who was also bought last year, until 2026. Does it make you worry that there's something else happening to be in a situation where we've got these people who are generally domestic players, as in like the United Kingdom, and who just don't seem to want to commit their future to the club at this moment in time? Because we said before, could it just be Champions League? But I don't know. It leaves you wondering, leaves you questioning, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, some of those names, obviously, like, you're talking about United fans, and it's obviously the dream for them to be there. Even Jade, despite being Canadian, she was very quick to say it was her club from the time she was a child. Her family supports United, so it's not hard to understand that. But yeah, it does make you think that there is something else going on. And I mean, I speak as, a biased United fan, but like and I think somebody mentioned agents as well. So agents obviously have a lot to do with it. I think people are thinking more about, we might be Champions League this season, but what's going to happen the season after that? I don't want to be tied down to a club that maybe won't be in the Champions League. I mean, hopefully we will, but I think there's a lot of that going on.
I mean, this is a big point. Emma, you're sorry for harping on about it, but definitely the youngest on the panel. This is an interesting point, isn't it? Because actually, on an agent's point of view, their job is literally to do the best and get the best that they can for the players that they've got. So to be in a situation like this, he says, from what I hear, telling women players not to sign long contracts, they can change clubs after a couple of years for free. You get your signed non-fee. But also, as Mark alluded to, the finances in the women's game at the moment pale in comparison to the likes of the men's game. These aren't players that are getting 30 odd million per contract. These are people that be getting a good wage. There's no doubt about that. It's certainly a comfortable one in the WSL, you would imagine, for the vast majority of the players. But it is one of those, isn't it, where if you sign a 6-year contract, as Jennifer suggests here, which, listen, as a United fan, I'm all for, absolutely, sign everybody up to 6-year contracts. The thing is, you don't have to review their pay until 6 years later. And actually, it's a short career. Can you sort of understand it from that point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it is the whole thing of the finances are a lot less than they are in the men's. And, part of me kind of worries that are the club as bad as communicating almost with the team as they are with the fans, in the sense of that's why players can let the agent sort of almost be the devil on the shoulder of, well, they're not matching your ambitions, you should go here instead. That's something that's been in my head, but I think longer contracts should be something that are a lot more regular, because as well, that works for everyone in the sense of if you agree a good enough wage, then the player is happy. And also the clubs are happy as well, because you don't have to review the wage. And also, if they're going to leave in that time, which highly likely they can do, you get a fee as well, which you can then reinvest. And that's kind of how the money grows in that sense.
Well, I imagine you've got to be in a situation where surely, Mark, you could have a contract that states it's going to be a 5-year contract, but after the second year, we bump the pay up, there's pay increases, all of that sort of thing, because then that even helps with your budgeting, because you can finance for it as you go. So I don't know. It all seems a little bit odd to me. But again, the agent's point, a really good one, isn't it?
It is, but again, it's up to, I think there are agents and agents. There are some that are more reputable than others, and given that you can have the contracts that you've said, and you can even have contracts that even give the option of a guaranteed sell-on after 4 years out of the 6 or something, if the player desires it. There's all sorts of things you can build in to a longer contract, and from the player's point of view, that gives you the security as well. One day someone's going to sign a 2-year contract and then be, at the end of it, get an ACL injury at the end of the season. I'm not wishing that on anyone, obviously, but that's going to happen at some point. And then where do they stand? The agent walks away to someone else. He's got a client who's going nowhere for another year, and then that's going to happen one day in football. So I think there's another side of it as well, where a longer term contract can give security as well. And as long as you're even handed with that, and there's a kind of incremental scale within it, or there's a kind of guaranteed review clause or something within it, or even a sell-on fee or whatever the player wants. There are all sorts of ways that can benefit the player as well. And I'm sure, it can be introduced into the women's game if there's a will.
No, I think I agree. So there we go. So there's lots there to look at. And I think the key takeaway that I'm getting from our chat in general is just that we feel a little bit neglected as fans sometimes. And that actually, I think for me, it's just frustrating because we've had an absolutely awesome Euros, which clearly translated into more people attending for Manchester United. LSB's never been as full as it has been for women's games this season. Manchester United selling out tickets wherever they go, getting away ends, all of those sorts of things. You then get the Lionesses making it to the final as well. You have a successful World Cup. And here we are again. Just when, the baton's passed, it just feels like we keep dropping it. And I think that's the bit that's frustrating. It's that opportunity to really build up the girls and build up that support at a time when they need it. Because, I'm noticing more and more as posts go out, more and more people getting involved on those that weren't getting involved on them last year because of the situation surrounding the club at the moment. And it's just there's a lot of negativity that's starting to creep in around that. And actually, this is the chance now to build that positivity up again and sort of drown those voices out, I think. So it would be really good if the club could just let us know what's going on. That'd be really nice because it's our club at the end of the day. We support them. And we just want to know what's happening. It's not much to ask. Do you know what I mean? We're not looking for information about the contract. We just like to know when they're playing. At the moment, it's a bit like maybe Emma Watson's got the Marauders map, and maybe there's just part of the app that we've got to look at. And if we say a certain word, all of the pre-season fixtures appear to us. And maybe Georgia Stanway's got that and we haven't. So perhaps that's what we're going to look for. We'll see if Emma Watson can sort that out for us. Listen, I've had a lovely time. Hope you guys have had too. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be back on the Man United channel talking about Man United. As good as the World Cup was, very enjoyable, but it's lovely because it means the countdown has begun. We are very nearly there. Mark, anything you want to shout out? Any bits and pieces you've written or done lately that you want people to go and have a look at?
Well, I mean, I apologise to Sarah, actually, that I never got around to doing the last instalment of my World Cup diary. Cut a long story short, went to a festival, came back with COVID, only just got over that.
That'll do it.
So really, the last week until the last couple of days have been a bit of a blur, really. I know I shouldn't be getting COVID now. I've been laughing and I've been the only person close to me that managed to avoid it, and I've managed to get it now for some reason. But anyway, so, but yeah, you can sometimes find me writing on Sarah's excellent blog, and I write for Barmy Article regularly. I'll be submitting an article for the first one in that, United's women's fanzine. And I did mention last time, to some hilarity, that my novel is called Balls. And I did check after some of the mirth of that last one about where you questioned what would happen if you Googled that. And I can confidently say that you Google it, you just get my name a lot of times, and nothing else. There's nothing else there to see, but it is called Balls. Anyway,
this is what we like to hear. And Sarah, of course, your rather wonderful channel, reddevilwomen.com.
Yep, that's it. I've kind of been slacking on that lately as well. So I was 3 days late with the Emma Watson news, but maybe she can give me a spell to turn back time. I can't wait for the chance this season that will spring up around her.
Time Turner, she wears it. Maybe she can just go back and post it. That would be great. Absolutely. And Emma, everything all right with you now? You finished your A-levels. What are you going to go and do now? Anything exciting?
I'm moving to uni next month, which is exciting. That's kind of it, really.
Well, don't forget.
Where are you going to uni, Emma?
Edge Hill.
Oh, right, yeah. Ormskirk, yeah, I know it. Worked with them in the past, actually, in another life, but that's for another day.
Amazing. Well, there we go. If we don't have you on before then, good luck, but hopefully you'll get a decent Wi-Fi connection. We'll be able to see you whilst you're there as well. But either way, all very good. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, especially in the comments. Always great having all of your comments to read. It helps it all to just go that a little bit better. I think we've got another show coming up. I couldn't tell you when, though, because, it's probably Thursday or Friday. What it's about, nobody knows, not even Emma Watson. So keeping things hidden now. Got to be careful. We're not a fan of communicating, so if they're not going to do it, we're not either. Thursday or Friday, maybe. Just take a look at your local TV listings and we'll be there. Until then, see you soon.
Thanks very much.